So this is my version of the Rainbow Warrior with a twist. The twist is the jig hook and the blue wire, which you'll see in a sec, that I wrap around the Rainbow Warrior. I use the size 18 jig hook and these glass beads, and then I do it all with the orange thread, which really pops under UV light. That's the blue wire that we'll wrap it with. So we'll get our orange thread started. I like to get quite a few wraps around itself just to make sure it's locked in. And we'll cut the excess. And then we're going to go with some pheasant tail for the tail of this nymph. And I'll get a couple wraps around this and then adjust the length of the tail. And I usually like to do about 3/4 of the length of the body. Sometimes I'll go a little shorter, but I found this is a pretty good length. And I'll take one wrap underneath the tail just to keep it from kind of curving down the hook. It gives it a little more pop. Then we'll cut the excess off. And we'll get our blue wire. And we'll wrap that in. I'm struggling a bit, obviously. And then once we get that wrapped in, we'll grab our pearl tinsel. I used to be pretty stingy with how much I used when I first started tying flies, but I've noticed that if you just cut a little more in length, it's a lot easier to work with, a lot easier to wrap the body. So I've got about probably 2 inches here. So I'll go ahead and wrap that in, and then we'll take it over the whole body, make sure the body's nice and orange. And then I'll take that thread up to the front. And then we'll start by wrapping that pearl tinsel in the opposite direction of the thread. And again, the longer that tinsel is, the easier it is to work with. And I make sure when I wrap this, I overlap quite a bit, just to make it sure it covers the whole body and is nice and solid. And then we'll get a few wraps of thread around that, lock it in, and then we'll go straight to the blue wire And we'll go the opposite direction of the tinsel. And same thing, obviously the longer it is, the easier it's going to be to work with. And same thing, we'll lock that in. You see I'm struggling with that tinsel a little bit, getting it to sit where I want, but once we lock that wire in, we'll helicopter it off, and then we'll get a few wraps in there to get the tinsel to sit where I want, and then we'll get the dubbing on. Get a very small amount of dubbing. I believe this is just pearl dubbing as far as the color. Make sure you get it wrapped on that thread nice and tight. Otherwise, as you start wrapping, it'll kind of fray off, which mine does a little here, but not too bad. I'll get that wrapped in, and then pull that tinsel up and around it, which again I have a little struggle with here, but eventually I get it wrapped in where I want it, and lock it in, and we'll go ahead and snip that off. And then we'll get our whip finisher out. And I usually whip finish twice. The first one, I think I did 2 wraps there. And then the second one, I should get 3 wraps in there. And that'll make that orange thread pop right behind the glass bead. And I'll get it nice and tight. Cut that thread off. And then I like to trim some of these long pieces of dubbing that are hanging off, just to kind of keep it all nice and tidy. But that's basically it. That's the Rainbow Warrior wrapped with orange thread, and it's got the twist of blue wire. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time.